horticulture students, welcome back to the chapter on seed propagation. This is part 3. So in the previous video, I got cut off before I could finish talking about watering and transplanting for our plug production. So what I wanted to really mention about watering here is that watering is going to be very, very critical for our seedlings. They do need high levels of moisture and humidity, and we don't need them to dry out. There's a couple of different ways on the screen here that show you some examples of how a greenhouse can water. So just making sure that your irrigation is ready and prepared before you get started is going to be very important to your success in production of those seedlings and plugs. All right, so transplanting, we had mentioned in part 2 about the different stages of plug production, and transplanting is going to be when we reach that final phase, which is stage 4, and our leaves are unfolding. They've reached that size where we can begin to harden them off. And to harden a plant off, what we're really trying to do is get them used to the outdoor environment. So we're going to reduce the humidity and moisture. We're going to reduce the temperature or get it to a level where it's more is closer to what we have outside, and we may even reduce fertilization a little bit. Okay, so in the picture you're going to see an image of a dibble, D-I-B-B-L-E, and dibbles are important for making sure that we can create those holes that we're going to insert our plugs into. So in the greenhouse, I like to use a pencil or even like a plastic utensil, like a spoon or something on the other, like the handle side of it, the smaller. I like to use a dibble because it's going to make that hole, but it's not going to compact all the soil around it too much. And that way you can also get it to the depth you want. You could put a marker there, and so that way you know how deep the hole needs to be, and then you can just insert your plug into it. All right, and that brings us into the main focus of part 3, which is going to be seed selection. So when we're choosing our seeds, it really depends on what our goal is. In the greenhouse, I'm trying to produce a uniform crop. So I'm ensuring that I'm purchasing from somebody that's certified, which means they're following different rules and regulations set by the state or the federal government. But I want to choose somebody that's got high quality seeds. I want to make sure that they've tested it for pureness of stock. So what I'm getting and planting is going to be accurate to what they're selling me. I want to make sure there's no weed seed or anything like that in it. Whatever is labeled, that's what it is. I don't want any other contaminants like disease or just trash, basically. So make sure you choose a reputable seed source to buy your seeds from. So there's some other categories you can also purchase through. So a land race, this is going to be a locally adapted or traditional variety of a plant. So a land race is going to be something that's more common in a specific area. It's not a universal type of thing. Okay, so if you think about the climates and everything of different areas, they're all going to be different. So the land race is going to be adapted specifically for that environment. So this maintains tremendous genetic diversity. Remember, when we're using seeds, this is sexual reproduction, and that has to have that female and male contributing their genes. And whenever we're using land races and we have them open populated or pollinated, then we are maintaining diversity. There is no guarantee that seed is going to look exactly like its parent. And that's not always a bad thing. In my garden, if I'm planting zinnia, I don't mind it being a land race because I just don't care. I'm not trying to get a specific thing. That genetic diversity is totally fine with me. It's great. That can also help in the long run if we're trying to figure out, ways to combat diseases and things like that. If we have something that is completely genetically the same, if a disease were to affect one, it's going to affect them all. So again, it really just depends on your goal as to what kind of seed selection you're going to do. So landrace is great for that genetic diversity. It is open pollinated, meaning out there anything's going to pollinate each other. And this is also where we get our heirloom varieties from. So an heirloom is it's been selected and saved from gardeners over generations. So these are less diverse than a landrace, but heirloom is still popular today. A lot of times people think it has much more intense flavor if you're thinking about vegetables, shapes, and colors. I always think to the Cherokee purple tomato. And if you haven't seen a Cherokee purple tomato, go ahead and Google that and you can see. Um, but there is popularity within that. So you can even purchase heirloom varieties, which we've grown heirloom tomatoes in the greenhouse as well. All right, then that carries us into the wild population. So these are the things that are out there that are native plant species that are growing, but they've evolved over time. They have become mostly uniform as far as how they look, which is the phenotype, and how they are genetically made up, which is the genotype. Now, because it's in a specific area, again, it can begin to adapt, but it's still going to stay pretty uniform. You've also got simple varieties. There's not like 5 million different varieties out there because they're all just kind of intermingling with each other. They're a small family. They're like a group of plants that are just out there slowly evolving over time. And then that carries us into hybrids. And a lot of times in the greenhouse, I'm going to use hybrids. And there's a few different reasons why. So the first thing is their commonly desired characteristics like disease resistance. They may have different flower colors than what we can normally get, and they have improved vigor and yield. So hybrid vigor is going to be improved growth or performance. So I want something that's going to grow well. I also want colors of flowers that people are going to buy. So that is one of the main reasons I purchase hybrids in the greenhouse setting. And a lot of our bedding plants and vegetable seeds are hybrids. And this is something that plant breeders are basically creating by taking different varieties or cultivars and cross pollinating them to get. So imagine if you had a ruffly flower petunia. A lot of people like that ruffly texture, but they wanted it in pink, and that's something they didn't have. They might take a ruffly flower petunia and a pink flower, and they're going to keep pollinating it until they get that hybrid that is a pink ruffly flower. So that would be like an example of a hybrid. Then that carries us into the transgenic cultivars. Transgenic is an organism into which genetic material from an unrelated organism has been introduced. So this is where you get into genetically modified organisms, or what we call GMOs, and the plant has been transformed for a variety of reasons. Okay, so that can be because it has a resistance to disease or insects or herbicides. Some crops have been transformed so that they can hold BT, so corn, soybeans, and cotton. They can hold BT, which is a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis. That's why we call it BT, because nobody has time to keep saying Bacillus thuringiensis. But BT provides a toxin that fights off pests. And so it's something that is naturally occurring in the soil, but by putting that into the plant itself, it's going to help prevent those pests and also help reduce the use of herbicides or insecticides. You can use that in citrus, you can use it in apples for different reasons. So there's some controversy over it, but I think the main goal, especially for GMOs, is we're just trying to use it as a tool to combat pest problems without necessarily using chemicals. Okay. So for seed production, this is going to be if you're trying to produce those seeds. Again, if you're trying to become a certified seed dealer, you're going to have to follow state and federal guidelines. You have to certify your seeds, basically proving that you have tested them for pureness of stock. There's no weed seed, there's no other basically trash in there. And again, those things have to be pure to stock, which means you label it, and whenever that person plants it, it's consistent with what you're saying it is, and it's going to be uniform in how it grows. So all the reasons that we purchase a seed from a certified dealer, you're going to have to do that to produce a seed. Okay. So if you go to a farmer's market, my sister-in-law, she's really great about growing zinnias and celosia and some different flower seed, and she'll collect the seed. She is not a certified dealer. Okay, well, I've purchased seed from her before in my garden where I'm just planting things and I do not care about variety or anything like that, it is totally fine. But again, like in a greenhouse setting where I'm selling to others, I would go through a certified dealer to purchase those seeds. Now, cool thing about plants is we've talked about plant breeders and the work that they put in to make these different hybrids or cultivars and things like that. So you can patent a plant. And the Plant Variety Protection Act, which began in 1970, it was amended in 1994. This act actually provides protection for those plant breeders that are coming up with this. Now, in order for them to get a patent, they have to, it has to be new material that has never been sold before its application. It has to be distinguishable from other varieties. So if it looks similar to something, there's no guarantee that it actually is a new item. So that wouldn't qualify, but it has to be distinguishable from other varieties. It has to be uniform with any variation being describable, predictable, or commercially acceptable. So if you are trying to patent a pink knockout rose, it has to stay pink. Okay, if it turns white, that's not really uniform. And then that also goes along with it being stable and remains unchanged according to its distinctive characteristics when reproduced. So that's the 4 things you have to do if the variety is going to be patented. Again, that has to be new, distinguishable, uniform, and stable. But the patent is going to allow that plant breeder to get royalties off of any of those products sold, and that patent usually lasts up to 25 years. So if you see plants that have special pots or containers on it, that person, that breeder that actually came up with that, is going to get royalties off of that product that is sold. And that helps them recover costs from all the time and the efforts they put in to creating that product. And it's just like privacy or piracy on movies. You can't go into a movie theater and video it and then sell it, because then that takes away from the person that created it and all the people that worked on it and the money that was put into it. So the plant patent helps prevent those issues and protect the grower. All right, when we get into seed saving, all right, so the seeds are going to have to be relatively mature. So they've had to have reached that maturation drying period that we talked about in part 1. Usually you want to collect them off of the plant before they disperse. So imagine a flower head that is dying, and it's not one you would put in a flower vase. You would want to cut that off, and then you could possibly shake it, or there's other ways you can remove those seeds. But you want to separate any chaff, insect parts, soil, or foreign material, anything that is not the seed. You want to do your best to remove that away from the seed. If it was in a fruit, you're also going to have to dry the fruit out and clean it off. When it comes to storage, there's a couple of things you really need to remember, and I have to practice this, especially more often at home. It has to have the right environmental conditions. Cold and dry is the best way to store a seed most of the time. So for every 10% drop in moisture, that can double the length of viability of the seed. So the drier, typically the better. And then same thing with temperature. For every 50 degrees, you can drop the temperature. You can also double the storage life. At my house, I'm bad for just sticking it in a cabinet. And it's mostly dry. But if I would put it like in a freezer, if you've heard of people putting seeds in freezers, there's a reason why. The seeds are going to be more viable longer if they're cold and dry. So a freezer is a really good option. And that wraps up the plant propagation chapter. So thanks for listening, and good luck on your quizzes and tests and assignments.